The email came on a Monday morning. Subject line, Class of 2005 20-year reunion invitation. I stared at it for a good 10 minutes before I clicked. I wasn't expecting to feel anything, but my chest tightened the second the school's crest loaded on the screen. I hadn't been back to Westbridge High since the day I left. Not for a visit, not even for curiosity. I had erased it, or at least tried to. Scrolling through the invite, I noticed something odd. My name wasn't on the main guest list. They had highlighted certain alumni, notable contributors to the legacy of Westbridge, and under that, James Carter, his photo, his bio, football captain, student body president, now some kind of real estate developer. I kept scrolling. No mention of me. At the very bottom, in tiny letters, a line. If your name does not appear above and you are interested in attending, please contact the committee. I almost laughed. I wasn't offended, not exactly. I just wasn't surprised. Back in school, I was the scholarship girl, the quiet one, the one who stayed after hours organizing props for the school plays but never got her name in the program. The one who won writing contests but whose trophies somehow never made it to the display case. I wasn't invisible, I was erased. And James? He made sure of it. He didn't bully me, not directly. He did worse. He made me feel like I simply didn't belong. Every time he walked by my table in the library and said, "You're always here. Do you even go home?" Or when he'd joke during assemblies, "Some of us are here for the spotlight, others for the free heating." The worst part? People laughed. They followed his lead. It was easier that way. So why go back? I didn't know, but something tugged at me. Maybe I needed to see if things had changed. Maybe I needed to see if I had changed. I sent an RSVP. Just my name. No title, no bio, just Anna Thompson. The reunion was set in the school auditorium. I arrived early, instinctively avoiding the main entrance and slipping in through the side hallway, just like I used to. The halls smelled the same. Floor wax and old paper. My footsteps echoed like ghosts. Inside the auditorium, a table displayed yearbooks, photos, varsity jackets. James's face was everywhere. Posters from his campaigns, a photo of him holding the championship trophy. There were entire spreads dedicated to the leaders of the class. My stomach tightened. My name wasn't in the book either. They had left out the entire drama section the year I wrote the script. People started arriving. At first, no one recognized me. A few gave polite smiles. One woman squinted, then gasped. "Wait, you're Anna, right? The girl who always wrote those creepy short stories?" I smiled. That was me. She grinned, awkward. "I always wondered what happened to you. We all thought you transferred or something." Before I could respond, I heard it. His voice. James. Loud, confident, theatrical as ever. He was standing near the refreshment table holding a drink, surrounded by his usual orbit of admirers. "I mean, let's be honest," he said, laughing. "Not everyone here was, part of the real class. Some people just, passed through." Laughter. Not everyone joined in, but no one objected. He turned slightly and saw me. A flicker. Just a second of hesitation, then that smile, that same arrogant curve. "Well, speak of the ghost, Anna. Wow. Didn't think you'd show. I figured you moved to a cave somewhere and wrote novels in Latin." I didn't flinch. "Just English, but thanks." He chuckled. "Glad you made it. This night's for the real contributors. But hey, everyone's welcome." He walked away without waiting for a response. I stood there, heart pounding, not because I was embarrassed, but because I realized I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who went silent. What he didn't know was that I had volunteered, quietly, anonymously, to help curate the reunion slideshow. I had sent photos, documents, scanned student publications, all under the name AT Archives. I knew they wouldn't question it. They needed help, and I knew exactly what to send. As people settled into their seats, the lights dimmed. James walked on stage with a grin. "Let's take a trip down memory lane," he said. "A tribute to the people who made Westbridge what it was." The first image flickered on screen. And there I was, 16, holding my state writing award. The headline read, "Local Student Wins National Short Story Contest." Gasps, silence. Then a quote appeared across the screen. "Not all impact is loud. Some stories change the room without ever being read aloud." The room went quiet. James froze on stage, and for the first time in 20 years, I belonged. I could feel every eye in the room shift toward me, some squinting, trying to match the teenager in the slideshow to the woman now seated quietly in the back. James stood frozen for a beat too long. Then he laughed, forced, nervous, and tried to carry on. "Well, looks like the tech team pulled some surprises. That was, unexpected." But the damage was done. The image had seared into everyone's mind. My name, once forgotten, had just been projected 30 feet wide, front and center. After the lights came back on, the energy in the room shifted. A few former classmates came over, pretending they'd remembered all along. One woman said, "You wrote that play about the library ghost, right? We all loved it." I nodded politely, though I remembered her laughing when I wore my thrift store shoes to drama club. Another man said, "Didn't you win something, like a writing scholarship?" I smiled. "I did. National level. It paid for most of college." James avoided me the rest of the night, sticking to his circle. I noticed how his laughs were louder, how he kept glancing toward me during conversations. It was subtle, but he was unraveling. I hadn't said a word to anyone, and yet the slideshow did more than I ever could with a speech. What he didn't know was that the whole thing, my picture, the quote, the placement, had been intentional. I had reached out months before, under my maiden name, to a junior organizer named Claire, who barely remembered me, but was kind. I offered to scan yearbooks and old articles to help curate memories. I never asked for credit. I just asked to make sure some of the quiet contributors were seen. And that phrase stuck, the quiet contributors. Claire loved it. That night, the reunion ended with polite farewells and back-patting nostalgia. James gave a final toast, skipping my name entirely, not a single mention. But as I was leaving, a man I barely recognized, Mr. Dwyer, our old literature teacher, caught me by the door. He said, "I knew you'd come back one day. You always did deserve the first page." I drove home in silence, letting that sentence echo in my mind. The days after the reunion were strange. I started receiving messages. Classmates I hadn't spoken to in 20 years sent emails. "I never knew all that about you. You were always so quiet, we should have paid more attention." Some were genuine. Others were wrapped in the guilt of people who suddenly realize they were complicit in someone's erasure. But then came James's message. It was short. "You planned that. Don't pretend you didn't. You've always wanted to take me down." I stared at the screen, not angry, just tired. After all this time, he still believed everything was about him. I didn't reply, but the temptation was there. Instead, I forwarded the message to Claire with a note, "Thought you should see this, just in case." She responded almost immediately, "He's been difficult. I'm so sorry." Later that week, Claire posted a photo album on the official reunion page. The first photo, my picture at the state writing competition. Caption, "One of the voices we nearly forgot. Not anymore." The comments came in fast. She really won that? Why wasn't she ever in the yearbooks? James said she dropped out. That one got to me, because I hadn't dropped out. I had transferred. After months of whispered rumors, of being excluded from projects I helped create, of finding my locker vandalized one too many times, I had quietly left. No farewell party, no yearbook signature, no closure. And behind it all, James. He had never needed a reason. I was a poor girl in a blazer 2 sizes too big, good with words, better than him at the only thing he didn't understand, empathy. But what he couldn't erase was time, and now time had brought me back. Not for revenge, for remembrance, because some stories refuse to stay erased, and sometimes the most powerful statement isn't confrontation, it's presence. I didn't need to explain who I was. The slideshow had done that for me. 3 days after the reunion, I got an email from Westbridge's alumni page. It was a thank you note from the committee, generic and cheerful. But what caught my attention was the subject line of the next message. Private message from James Carter. I stared at it for a long time before opening. It wasn't long. Nice move with the slideshow. You always wanted to make me look like the bad guy. Pathetic. I laughed quietly. That was James, still convinced everything revolved around him, still mistaking consequences for conspiracies. I didn't respond. Not yet, but something had shifted in me. The truth is, I hadn't gone to that reunion for revenge. I had gone because a part of me still needed closure. I thought seeing the place, the people, would release something I'd carried for far too long. But now it felt like the story wasn't done. A week later, I got another message, this time from Claire, the kind organizer I had worked with. I'm so sorry. James is making a fuss, saying the slideshow was edited to attack him. He's calling it a setup. But I've got your emails. I know it wasn't. I thanked her, and before I could stop myself, I wrote, "He always needed the room. I only needed the silence." She replied with a heart emoji and one line. The quiet ones always win in the end. But James didn't let go. 2 weeks after the reunion, a public post appeared on the alumni page. Some content shown at the reunion was unapproved and reflected personal bias. We apologize to anyone misrepresented. Claire called me that night. He pushed for the post, said he'd sue for defamation. The school caved. I wasn't angry, I was tired. So I did what I had trained for my whole life. I wrote. Not a blog post, not a rant, a story. Fictional, of course, but not really. It was about a boy who grew up needing applause to survive, and a girl who disappeared from every frame because she refused to bow. I published it under my real name. The title was simple, The Reunion. It wasn't a bestseller, but it traveled. Teachers shared it. Former classmates recognized the parallels. One even messaged me, "Is that supposed to be about Westbridge? It felt like our class." I replied only, "Some truths are too quiet to be heard, so we write them instead." A few weeks later, something strange happened. A journalist reached out, a former student from a different school. She had read the story and asked if she could do a piece on unseen students, those who made an impact without recognition. I said yes. When the article came out, it mentioned my name, the story, and the slideshow at Westbridge. It didn't mention James, but somehow he made it about himself. He posted a comment under the article. Funny how some people need to rewrite the past to feel relevant now. But that's when something beautiful happened. People answered back. One by one, former classmates replied, She was always relevant. We just didn't see it. That slideshow? It made me realize how many people we overlooked. She made me cry with a single photo. What did you do? Win a football game? James didn't comment again. A month later, Claire invited me to speak at the school's career day. I hesitated. I didn't want to go back to that building, but something told me I needed to. When I arrived, I saw the display wall near the main office had changed. There was a new section, Alumni Impact. My photo was there now. Not big, not flashy, just a simple frame with the headline, Author, Advocate, Quiet Force. I stood there for a long time, just breathing. Later, in the library, I spoke to a small group of students and told them the truth, not just about writing, but about being invisible, about having to prove you matter long after you've already left the room. One girl raised her hand. She wore glasses too big for her face and spoke in a whisper. Did they ever apologize? I paused. Not all apologies come in words. Sometimes, silence is the loudest one. Afterwards, Claire hugged me. She whispered, "You rewrote history." Now, I just reminded them who really lived it. The invitation came folded in thick ivory cardstock. Westbridge Literary Festival, honoring alumni authors. I almost tossed it. Not because I wasn't flattered, but because I wasn't sure I wanted to keep going back to that place. It had taken me years to leave Westbridge emotionally. The slideshow, the article, even the career day. Those were enough. Closure had been achieved. Or so I thought. But there was something about this invitation that felt different. It wasn't from Claire. It was from the head of the English department, someone I had never met. And attached to it was a handwritten note. Your story reached more students than you know. Would you consider giving our keynote? Keynote. I sat with the word for a long time. It didn't feel real. I had spent years building a quiet career, ghostwriting, freelancing, publishing short stories in niche magazines. I had done well, but I had never stood on a podium with my name in bold on a program. That stage had always belonged to James. I said yes. The auditorium hadn't changed much. The same worn seats, the same curtains, but this time they were open for me. There was a banner across the top that read, "Words that Shaped Us." I arrived early, as always, and stood backstage watching as the crowd filtered in. Students, teachers, a few familiar faces in the back, alumni I hadn't expected to see, including James. He stood near the exit, arms crossed, unreadable expression. He hadn't spoken to me since the article went viral. He hadn't replied to the classmates who defended me. But here he was. I didn't let it throw me. When they called my name, the applause was polite at first, then warmer. I stepped onto the stage and looked out, not at James, but at the row of students in the front, young faces waiting. I began not with my resume, not with my awards, but with a story, one they hadn't heard. I used to sit right over there, I said, pointing to the far corner. Third row, second seat from the left. Every lunch period, I'd eat alone and write, stories no one read, until one day I stopped writing. A pause. Because someone told me I didn't belong. I let the silence hang. But stories have a strange way of surviving. Even when we're too tired to tell them, they wait until we're ready. I talked about voice, about power, about being overlooked, about the long journey back, not to revenge, but to self-worth. When I finished, they stood. The entire room. I didn't look for James. I didn't need to. Backstage, Claire found me again. She hugged me tight. "Did you see who came?" she asked. "I saw," I said. "He's quiet now." "Good," I replied. "Let him listen for once." As I was packing up to leave, someone approached. Not a student, not a teacher. It was James's wife. She introduced herself quietly. "I read your book," she said, "and the article. He didn't want me to, but I did." I didn't know what to say. She continued, "He's not the same. Losing the spotlight broke something in him, but I think he needed to lose it." I nodded. We all lose something. The trick is choosing what we let define us. Before she left, she said one last thing. "Thank you for staying kind." Kind. I hadn't thought of myself that way, but maybe she was right. That night, I received a final message. No name, just an email titled, "You were right." The message was simple. "I don't know how to be invisible. You always did. But maybe that was your power. Mine was noise. Yours was silence. You won." There was no signature, but I didn't need one. Some stories end quietly, but they end with dignity. And that, I realized, was all I ever needed. The weeks after the literary festival moved quietly, the way I liked it. No viral posts, no headlines, just messages from teachers, students, even strangers. Your words stayed with me. I never thought about silence that way. One student wrote, "You made me believe quiet people could win." That one made me cry. I went back to writing. Nothing dramatic, just returning to the rhythm I knew. Mornings at my desk, coffee gone cold, cats curled at my feet. But something had changed. For the first time, I wasn't writing to prove anything. I wasn't trying to be seen. I already had been. Then one day, Claire called. Her voice sounded different, brighter, but also more formal. "We're starting an endowment," she said. "The school finally approved a program for students who contribute outside the spotlight. Writers, coders, artists, caregivers, kids like you used to be." I smiled. "What's it called?" She hesitated, then said, "The Anna Thompson Legacy Grant." I didn't speak for a moment. She continued quickly, "It's just a small fund, but it'll help cover application fees, equipment, just give them the boost they might not ask for." I finally said, "They don't need to ask. That's the point." We hung up, and I sat there, staring at the wall. Not with pride, with peace. I thought of the girl I used to be, how I'd walk those hallways gripping my notebooks like armor, how I'd hear James's voice trailing me. "Why are you even here?" And how for years I'd believed he was right. But now, my name was on a wall. Not because I demanded it, because someone else, someone who once saw me in the shadows, remembered. The next spring, I was invited to present the first scholarship. I almost said no, but then I remembered that girl again, watching others be chosen, always wondering what it would feel like to be called to the front. I returned to Westbridge with a small envelope and a speech. The student's name was Maya. She was soft-spoken, intense-eyed, brilliant in a quiet way that reminded me too much of my younger self. As she walked to the podium, she whispered, "I didn't think they even knew I was in the running." I smiled. Neither did I. When she left the stage, the room applauded longer than they had for any sports trophy that night. Afterward, James was there again. Not front and center, just standing near the exit, watching. He didn't approach me, but as I passed him, he nodded. It wasn't an apology. It didn't need to be.